We put the age probably into the 15th century. The Koreans were watching a comet in 1491, February 12th.
Really?
And on February 14th, it disappeared. It wasn't there. And he then got into the data about the comet. We know what comet was, and it made a very close approach to the Earth. And there were some astronomers who believed it actually hit. And at the same time, Mike Bailey in Northern Ireland, he believes that the comets come in, they are gas-rich, so they're mainly in ammonia. And he looked for ammonia in ice cores, and it wasn't looked at before. And he found the biggest spike in 1,000, 2,000 years occurred at that time, 1491.
Really?
And so from that, and some of the legends were recent, there are about 5 lines of evidence. We tweaked it. The legends say it occurred in the evening, the sun went down, so we figure about 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, February 13th, 1491, this thing came into the Tethon Sea. And some of these comets have generated tsunami that have sent water long distances in. And we know this from a feature which are what we call chevrons. They look like parabolic dunes. And you get a series of them. They're a parabolic shape embedded in a parabolic shape. So they look like the little chevrons on military uniforms. What we find in them that they have gravel. And it's angular gravel, and some of it's fairly large pieces, and it's pretty hard to blow gravel in wind-blown deposits. And the sediment range, size range, 20 kilometers down the axis of the chevron is coarse sand, whereas wind-blown sand sorts very well and is finer.
These are very high, aren't they? They're about, what, 100 meters high?
Some of them get up to 200 meters. We found some in Madagascar that were up at 200 meters. And traveled 40 kilometers as the crow flies inland. So they're only 10 kilometers from the coast, but they're at an angle to the coast. So the water will travel 40 kilometers inland. Fairly flat coast.
We're talking about a mega tsunami here.
We're talking about a mega.
What sort of size, when you say going over a headland, what sort of size are we talking here?
We would be looking at a wave able to go over headlands up to 80 meters.
80 meters high?
Yeah.
That's very high.
Very.
Very high.
But it didn't go far, this one in 1500 didn't go far inland. It was running at an angle to the coast.
Just so we get an idea of what these Aborigines were seeing. And what other elements, are they talking about in the mythology? Anything suggest the cosmological side of things?
Legends inland, the Wilcannia legend actually talks about a comet coming in and exploding. And then there was flooding of land afterwards. And we know that if a comet drops into the ocean, you get the tsunami, but it also vaporizes large volumes of water that drop out as rain in the next week.
The fires of Tamatea, that's very intriguing, the Maori mythology. What some of the things associated that with, perhaps the moa bird, perhaps you could just tell us a little about that?
The description came down in the South Island, down in Invercargill, Tapa Nui, that there was this massive explosion. It burnt the whole landscape. It was also responsible for the extinction of moa. They fled to the swamp areas and were burnt. And there are massive piles of moa bones and sort of moa graveyards.
Have they been carbon dated? Or?
And the burning's carbon dated, and that's one of the indicators that comes out to the 15th century.
Right.
So we think they were dating this event as well.
So the Maoris themselves actually claim the moa bird was killed by this thing in the sky.
In the south part of the South Island, they were this earlier group. And so their legends are different and denied by the Maori. Quite a bit of naming of towns that can be linked to the fires at Tamatea or Tsunami. There is some geological evidence along that coast, but it's harder to determine or detect.
What about this, you say there's a crater being discovered off Stewart Island, off the south coast of New Zealand, and some people believe that could be let's say, the end result of the comet?
Well,
possibly.
we tripped across by accident Dallas Abbott from Columbia University. I didn't think you could detect impacts in the ocean. I thought the water would absorb the impact and there wouldn't be anything left. And she came back to me and said, no, that's not correct. You can detect impacts. And I have a database, the World Database of Bathymetry. She came back and said, look, I think I really have one down near Stewart Island. And it's about 20 kilometers wide. It's slightly circular. It's on the edge of the continental shelf, and it's recent. You can tell it's recent because there's some, you can tell by the bathymetry how much it infills. And the ocean slowly accumulates sediment, and you can tell by the reflectance how much sediment's accumulated, and this one hadn't accumulated much sediment. So she said, I think it's within the last 1,000 years. Subsequent to that, she got some cores around the crater, and there's a world database of ocean cores. And the ones that were downwind, so to speak, on the east side, had tektites in them at the surface. The ones upwind didn't have tektites.
Now, of course, tektites, Ted, are small glass stones about the size of a small coin, and they're always associated with comet and meteor impacts and discharges.
And again, this fits in with this description. If this comet in 1491 would have come in from the northwest to the southeast, and it would have landed, it would have splayed out sediment, and the sediment would have tended to go to the southeast corner, and that's where the tektites were.
So we can see there's powerful evidence that a major comet discharge and impact occurred in the Tasman Sea. It shattered an area from southern New Zealand to the whole southeastern coast of Australia. In 1500 AD, Melbourne's Port Phillip Bay was included in this cosmic drama. Comet events cause not only tsunamis, but continent-wide earthquakes, burning trees, animals on a colossal scale. We checked the whole southern coastline of the Australian continent for tsunami evidence. We looked for chevrons from Albany here near Perth, right across the Australian Bight, to Kangaroo Island, the Aboriginal Island of the Dead, through here to King Island, Flinders Island, Cape Otway, Port Phillip Bay where Melbourne lies, right across to Eden. And everywhere we went we found chevrons, and those chevrons faced 70 degrees the whole way along a coast. What a remarkable find. What event had caused this? Andrew and Georgiana McRae were amongst the first settlers of Melbourne. They built a house down on the Mornington Peninsula, and McRae was eventually named after them. They were great friends with the local Aboriginal Bunyurong tribe. Georgina often painted them, and we also learned from her diary they loved to witness the local corroborees. And from them, they learned a lot of the history of Port Phillip Bay, particularly the catastrophic events that had led to the formation of this unique inland sea. We find out some very interesting facts from her diary. Let's hear what she has to say.
I believe you're interested in my diary. I happen to have it with me right now. 30th of September 1849. Mr. Robert Russell says that Mr. Cobb talks to the blacks in their own language, and that the following is an account given by them of the formation of Port Phillip Bay.
Plenty long ago, Gago, Gigo, Gugo, along a Karaya, men could cross dry foot from our side of the bay to Geelong. There was a great harrigan, then bending of the trees and uprooting. The earth sank and the sea rushed in through the heads, till the void places became broad and deep, just as they are today. She also noted that Governor Latrobe added the Aboriginal tradition that the Yarra's course followed the Curram Curram swamp and debouched into the sea at Western Port. Near the junction of the Darrabon with the Yarra, evident traces of earthquake are to be seen, especially northwards, where the ground has dropped 50 foot below the surrounding surface. So this is incredible. Because of Georgiana McRae, we know the Bunyurong people witnessed the formation of Port Phillip Bay. And it was a cataclysmic event. There were tempests, the trees were blowing over, water poured in through the head on what was once a grazing land for kangaroo, sunk beneath the force of earthquakes, and is now an inland sea, a huge inland sea where Melbourne sits on the headland. Let's go to Wold Thornhill. He's got some interesting explanations about how earthquakes, meteorites and other cosmological events cause horrendous damage here on Earth.
The idea of electrical activity in the cosmos flies in the face of cosmology, which relies on a gravitation-only model. This is despite the fact that NASA finds evidence day by day that gravity cannot explain. The electric force is 1,000 billion, 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 billion times stronger than gravity. It's always been a puzzle to geologists where the energy of an earthquake comes from. And the energy comes from the stored electric charge within the Earth. A discharge takes place beneath the Earth, then you must get effects on the surface that are felt. And the earthquake is one such consequence.
Right, so it's just like thunder and lightning, but it's beneath
It's underground,
the Earth.
yes. That also extends to volcanoes, because it's just a story that we're told that you have these diapirs, as they're called, these molten blobs of magma rising through the rock above and finally coming out on the surface. It's much simpler to imagine that what is going on is a discharge from within the Earth, an electrical discharge to the surface of the Earth. And quite often lightning has been observed above a newly forming volcano.
Yes, yes.
And also some of the most spectacular lightning discharges ever seen
Above volcanoes.
are above
yes.
volcanoes, yes.
And also, didn't you tell me before earthquakes or large ones, they're detecting large electric
Effects.
currents?
Yes, yeah, they've detected all kinds of electrical effects, including magnetic effects too. And things like glows, discharges above ground. And animals seem to pick up on this changed electrical environment.
But think about all the other evidence. The Tsunami shellfish dump, dated to roughly around about 500 years ago, with carbon analysis. And what other things can we bring to evidence this event? Well, I'm going to show you something pretty fascinating now, right down on the beach lines. Let's go and have a look.
Beautiful morning here in Melbourne. This is Port Phillip Bay. It stretches right around the periphery and leads out to the ocean. So this is fairly calm water around here, but there's some very interesting things I'd like to show you. Petrified trees and evidence of a tsunami. This wood stretching all up along this beach. We're close down. See actually hunks of the wood. There's this stone that's actually part of the tree. It's petrified and embedded as well. So you've got some sedimentary effects, but this whole tree spreads along the beach and there's roots and everything going. It's quite extraordinary. See this section here, this rock is actually part of the tree. It's petrified within the tree. It's not surrounding the rock or enclosed, but this tree has some amazing qualities. It's actually quite fresh bits of wood. Let's go over and have a look. Now look at this here. This is actually fresh wood. Fresh wood, but moving over to here, this is solid, it's rock, but it's part of the tree. So it's quite extraordinary. And again, the fresh tree here, then little enclosures of rock, mixtures of wood and rock. And here, mixtures of wood, same part of the tree, but it's rock. Back here it's carbonite, very hard, but still be able to scratch it with your nail. Then over here, a sort of sandstone that's melted into the tree.
These badly burnt shells and trees remind me of the fires of Tsunami. Did a similar event occur on Port Phillip Bay?
Jumble of stone, melted together, thrown together, pressed together. Ironstone with embeddings of what looked like tar, basalt, ironstone. How was this formed? What sort of tectonic event occurred here? Quite extraordinary. I just would have loved to have been around when this was happening, just to find out what on earth did happen. Maybe these guys know what went on. Were they around when it happened?
They don't look naive. Did they believe that carbon trading could stop the insatiable march of nature?
They're plant fossils and they're wood fossils. But how do you turn this piece of wood into this fossil piece of wood, which is calcium and silicon and other minerals, and maybe even to this, where there's high iron content? Classic geological theory reckons in terms of millions of years to turn plants and animals into fossils. The theory is silicon, calcium, other minerals invade the plant's organism, which is mainly carbon, and gets rid of it and takes it over and embeds itself where the carbon once was. Modern theory, more and more, is going to transmutation, where the carbon actually turns into silicon and calcium. How would it do that? Just how would it do that? And not only does it do it, but unlike conventional geological theory, it happens instantaneously. When Shoemaker Levy 9 impacted on Jupiter, it discharged electrically well above the surface of that planet. A massive thunderbolt was released and it devastated the area below. This is the sort of mechanism that I believe is involved in the making of fossils. In Canada, pine trees had a huge high voltage line fall on them. Within 2 days they were fossilised. There's also pictures of fossilised people that have been near power lines. This is the sort of mechanism that's rethinking geology. This is electronic transmutation. Some of these elements are so close in the periodic tables that it doesn't take much for them to be stripped of neutrons and protons and become another element. This is how, with electrical discharge, we create fossils instantaneously, and the structure of the plant or the animal is preserved. And particularly, as Wal Thornhill points out, electrical activity is also involved around earthquakes and volcanoes. When Port Phillip Bay sunk beneath the existing ground level, there must have been huge electrical discharges right around the basin. This, I believe, caused the fossilisation in these examples. Trees, shells, and all sorts of marine creatures would have been fossilised right on the spot. What a beautiful rural outlook. Plantations, hills in the distance. Mythology says they skip like lambs. But the founders of modern geology, Hutton and Lyell, looked out on landscapes like this and they saw the rain falling, the wind, even if it was storms and tempests, it gradually changed the landscape. Slow erosion, slow deposition down to the valleys. Their idea was that it took millions and millions of years to form this landscape. Sometimes the sea would slowly come in, depositing shells, bones, and then recede, explaining the many layers. This is known as the theory of uniformity. Even Darwin was influenced by these ideas. His idea was evolution by slow change, natural selection. But they're all radically wrong. Let me introduce you to the revolutionary French archaeologist Claude Schaeffer. He examined over 200 sites in the Middle East,
And at each site he found 5 destruction layers, each one containing a dead civilization. These were separated by up to 30 metres of ash. He found mega destructions that do not occur in our times. Mega tsunamis, continent-wide earthquakes, supervolcanoes and other natural cataclysmic events that had shaped civilization. But he also saw sites in Europe where similar things had occurred and in India. He in fact believed this destruction had occurred around the world. It was ubiquitous. I'm sure this sort of thing happened in Australia to the Aboriginal people as well. We need to re-examine our ideas on archaeology and take into account these destructions which I am sure have occurred to the Aboriginal nation as well. The catastrophic events that occurred in Port Phillip Bay certainly affected the destiny of the Bunyurong tribe. And I suspect further west in Kangaroo Island, South Australia, the Aboriginal Island of the Dead, something similar occurred. Certainly the tribal mythology supports this. But I think even bigger dramas occurred in an earlier epoch. In our next episode, we're going to discover exactly what did happen. It's very mysterious.
We ran down on the mountain, a river out to sea. We lift off to the stars above. Our spirits shine for free.